So we had that video at the beginning that hope that you all had a chance to review, and this is a little video that we made with Hannah Dweck, who was in my lab, where we went through some of the things that problems that we were working on, which was trying to transform cell types from one type of cell type to another cell type, especially focusing on the informatics part of the work. Now, the second part of the bioinformatics module, we designed it mostly to try to get students just a little taste of what it means to talk about algorithms and computing things. And I know that some students are really into computers, and some students have actually done a fair amount of programming. Some of them actually hacked into your school systems. We've had one in our local school district, such an event. But even the students who are very proficient with computers actually are not always proficient with the idea of algorithms and what it means to actually solve problems by designing algorithms. So they know how to program things like hacking your network or things of that sort. But that's not really the same thing as mathematical algorithms that try to solve problems. And so in this module, we try to give a little bit of idea of what kind of algorithm and problems we try to solve, especially with respect to analyzing genomic data. So the main problem we set up, and that takes off from the video that we made, is the idea that oftentimes that we have to go through this large string, the 3 million letter string of the human genome, and try to look for specific string patterns. Okay? And this is actually exactly the same problem that your Microsoft Word tries to solve when you have open a document and then you go to the find page and then you try to search for a particular word. Now, in real bioinformatics problems, things are a little bit more sophisticated because we don't try to look for exact patterns, but we try to look for, say, approximately matching patterns. And those kind of things make the problem much harder. But here we just dealt with the simple problem of searching through the letters. So we give that example, and then we start with this idea of how do you describe a problem that's an everyday life problem in algorithmic terms. And by an algorithm, what we really mean is a series of short instructions. And so it's a finite set of instructions. That means that you don't get to describe things in words in some kind of infinitely creative way. You have to use some small number of instructions and string those instructions together to solve the problem. In computer programming languages, the fundamental instructions that you're allowed to use is about 30 different instructions. Okay? Now, programming languages can then elaborate on this and make things much more complicated, but the very basic instruction set you have is about 30 different instructions. So here we give this example. Well, suppose that you were asked to say, solve the problem, how do I get to the bathroom? Which was actually the very first instructions we gave you yesterday in this workshop. And you're only allowed to use a small set of possible actions, right? And so then here's, for example, one way to solve it. Now you can pose to your students any problem of this sort. How do you tie your shoelaces? Okay? But give only a finite number of things that they can use to solve this problem. And that really is the fundamentals of algorithms of programming design. The computer only understands certain small number of things, and you have to somehow string together those small number of things to solve the problem that you want to solve. So the next is a bit more of a complicated programming problem. And this is actually a problem that is taught in most elementary. If you were to take an algorithm class in a computer science department, this is one of the very first problems that they ask you to solve. And this is called the sorting problem. You're given, say, a set of numbers or a set of words, and you need to sort those numbers in order. Okay? So in this case, we chose to present words and asking students to sort these words, find ways to order these words in alphabetical order. Right? Now, there's only 3 of them, and obviously you can just look at it and do this. And this is really the key question. When you look at these 3 words and then put them in alphabetical order, what are you actually doing in your brain?
You're doing different steps. You're going through steps quickly.
Absolutely. Well, what do you think you're doing, Larry?
You're doing an algorithm.
Yeah, but what algorithm?
I'm trying to think. All right, I'm going. All right, first I'm looking at the first letter,
yeah.
And then I'm referring back to the alphabet. I'm thinking which letter comes first. And that word is first.
Yeah.
And then I go to the leftover words. The first letters of each one, and then I see which one comes first.
Great. Yeah, so you're doing 2 things. One, this is actually an algorithmic, so we're looking at using a lookup table, which is what we already memorized, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We've already memorized this alphabetical order, right? If I told you to do it in Korean, you wouldn't be able to do it because I have a different lookup table, right? In some sense, this alphabetical ordering is obviously arbitrary, right? It's something we've already memorized. And we use those memorized lookup tables to know where what's first, what's second, and so on and so forth, right? And we automatically do it. Okay. The second part is that actually the algorithmic part that you just described. Most of the time, if we ask people to look at something and say 3 words and put them in alphabetical order, implicitly most of the time what people would be doing is somehow going through and finding what you think is the first, right? And then, so here, well, it's easy because they all start with different letters. So bat is obviously the very first in the alphabetical order. You put it first, then you exclude it from your consideration. You go back, look at the remaining one, okay? And then, oh, cat. So you put that next, exclude that from consideration, and then the last one, rat. Right? Okay. So that actually is in fact, a known algorithm for sorting, and you can apply exactly the same thing even if you had a list of 100 letters, right? You would be able to apply that algorithm over and over and repeat that process, and you can see that it'll give you the right order. Now, I bet you do this all the time. I do it with my students. After I give them a test, I have to sort them through alphabetical names for the test sheet that I collected, right? And we kind of do this actually, right? You do it physically if you use that algorithm. Yeah. So the idea of this exercise is to somehow ask the students to be able to describe this kind of process in a very precise term. So there's one set of one possible answer, and this is not the only possible answer. Okay? There are different ways of doing this as well. Okay? So, for example, you might make slots. And in fact, this is what I do when I am sorting through test paper. A slot, B slot, C slot, and so on and so forth. Right? So initially, you go through and as soon as I see a name starting with A, I put it into the A slot, B slot, and so on. Now, it's still not sorted, right, completely, because there's people with the same starting last name. I go to that part and redo that process. Right? So that's another possible approach. There's many different ways to solve the same problem. Okay, now we introduce the idea, going back to actual problem, of idea of sequence motifs. This was discussed in the video, the starting video. And the idea we present is that in this 3 billion base pair letter genome, certain kinds of sequences of letters, or we could call them words, are repeated in the genome because they are functional elements that's used over and over again in the genome. Okay? And this could be repeated because it's coding for a particular amino acid. It could be repeated because it's a part of the DNA genome process that controls the transcription of RNA. So in general, when we de novo sequence the organism we have not seen before, one of the first things we try to see is that there's a lot of repeats in this genome, because those repeats may be there, the motif may be there because it's functionally important. Now motifs come in flavors of how many letters it's comprised of. Since there's only 4 letters, A, C, G, T in the genome, obviously if one letter motif is repeated millions and millions of times, right? So you see T's over and over again, A's over and over again. 2-letter motifs like AA, AC, AG, AT, there's 16 possible those things are also repeated all the time, right? So what we're really interested in is fairly large letters. So if I have 4 letters, for example, that's 4 to the 4th power or 2 to the 8th power, so 256 the possibilities. And those are not so possibilities, all that repeated that many times, right? And so we're always trying to add, is something repeated more than what we expected by chance? And we try to look for them, okay? So here, started out with this exercise of just finding those 4-letter motifs. Now I just realized, Kristen, I guess we need to make a little note of this. So we are asking students to find a motif here, but we actually what we mean is finding a 4-letter motif. Okay? Obviously, there's lots of 1-letter motifs and so on. And then pressing on this will give you the answers of the 4-letter motifs. And here, there are 2 different 4-letter motifs in those strings.
These motifs tend to be non-coding.
Well, so there are motifs that are coding motifs as well. Okay, so, but in general, people do tend to be more interested in the non-coding motifs, because the coding motifs we know quite well what they are about. They code for the proteins. Okay, so that was the warm-up problem, and then here to find all the 4-letter motifs in this. And this will take up quite a bit of time, okay, for the students to be able to do this. Okay. Usually what they will be doing is basically, so here's the algorithmic part. What we call these kinds of things the naive algorithm, in that here's the brute force approach. You probably start with the first 4, okay? Write it down on a sheet of paper. Okay. Then you look at the next. So here's the first 4 CCCA. You write it down. Then you take the next 4 CCCAT and ask whether it's in your existing list or not. If not, you write that down again, right? And then you go to the next one, CATT, and same thing. And you just repeat this over and over all the way to the end. Okay? So that's the brute force approach that somebody might be able to use. Then you'll be able to find all these possible repeated 4-letter motifs. Right? Okay, so then we ask a couple of this discussion questions, which are again sort of this idea, reinforcing the idea that algorithms are composition of simple instructions and figuring out how do you compose the simple instruction set to solve the problems. What we haven't discussed here is the problem of efficiency of the computation. Okay? We chose not to do that because it's a little bit more difficult subject, but you could choose to do that. Okay? So as we discussed about, say, sorting test results into alphabetical order, I'm sure that over the years you have developed ways to make that process faster and faster, right? So you've developed algorithms that you don't really realize you did, in which now the way you do that is faster than you might have started out with. And that's the notion of algorithmic efficiency. Many problems can be solved in multiple different ways, and some ways are more efficient than others. And in fact, one of the major things that we try to do in bioinformatics is to find efficient ways to solve problems, because 3 billion letters, that's a very, very large problem. Right? So if we want to do anything with 3 billion letters, it always takes a long time. So anytime we can find a faster way of solving the problem, then that's a significant advance. So that is for covering this module. Do you have any questions, discussion points?
I don't know. When I was reading that paragraph, I was just thinking like the reference genome, and how there's multiple codons that make the same amino acid. Is that taken into account? It's not that much, but I would think that, do they care about that?
Oh yes, absolutely. So that comes to, so that's a different kind of algorithmic problem. Right? So in fact, that's a very important thing. That one of the things that we try to do is that, so there are multiple codons that code for the same amino acid, right? So those are called synonymous codons. Right? So when you have, say, for example, looking at the tumor genome, right? So tumor is your own cells that has been mutated. Right? And so this genome differs from the somatic genome that is your normal genome. Right? And we are always comparing, say, that the mutation in the tumor to the normal to see what has changed. Right? I said to you before that typically when we look at tumor genome, thousands of things have changed, because tumor often involve hundreds, tens to hundreds, or maybe thousands of different mutations. Of those, we are really usually interested in what is the change that might have driven the cell to become a tumor, because there's lots of other random background mutations happening that doesn't make it, that may not have anything to do with the fact that this cell became a tumor. And one of those things is that if the mutation is synonymous, that is, hasn't really changed the amino acid, we usually think most likely this probably wasn't part of the process that created the tumor. Okay? So we often go through what are the mutations that happen and ask, would this mutation have changed the amino acid or not changed the amino acid? And we prioritize the ones that have changed the amino acid as possible genes that cause the tumor. And that, of course, has to be done computationally, because we get thousands and thousands of positions that we looked at.
So I was going to say that this fits really well when you're doing like setting procedures at the beginning of the year. You could kind of hint at this idea of the algorithms and kind of introducing it. Like I know that in the past I've done like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and like that's just to set procedures and why it's important to do and follow lab procedures. And having the kids create their own procedure for it also. I mean, I can see very easily where I could use this just as an introduction to the class. So.
That is great. But now, one thing that is kind of important is that whatever problem that you pose to them, like making peanut butter and jelly sandwich, ideally the allowable instruction should be small number, and that you have to repeat it in order to solve the problem, because one of the things that computer does well is repeat the instruction over and over. Right? So that's the main thing that happens in algorithms.
I could very easily see myself like tweaking it though, and just saying, well, if anybody, because a couple of my students, their parents own a business, like food businesses, and they might have to do that kind of procedure over and over again. So I could definitely have it as like an elaboration, a continuation of that. I like it.
For if there was staff luncheon and your students were asked to make peanut butter jelly sandwich for 75 people.
Yeah, that sounds like a great problem.
Yeah, actually, our seniors actually do a lunch day once a week. So that actually would be a really good idea. Thank you.
One of our classic computer science problems is called the facility location problem. So like in here, you come in and we put these tables here and here and here, right? Now you could have put the tables over here. And the question is, what's the most efficient way to put finite number of resources in a way that is the closest to everybody? Okay? This is actually the kind of problem that Amazon solves all the time in order to figure out where to put their warehouses.
And how to put the robotics inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we use one for the grocery store, and it's like the grocery store, and where you were talking about the part where you're finding the algorithms and all that. And we taught the students that if you look at most grocery stores, they're coming to your product. In other words, it was not designed randomly. And if you look at the way we had them to study the aisles and the way they're organized, and they said, you'll notice, like the heavier items are on the lower shelves, the lighter items are on the higher shelves. They said that wasn't done randomly. And we try to have them see other things that are designed right within a simple grocery store.
That's a great problem, and actually it also brings up another...
Plus, look at how many items are in a grocery store. That's why we're trying to use that analogy for this.
Absolutely. And one other important point that brings up is that in realistic problems, what we are always trying to do is solve an optimization problem. Right? So in the grocery store example, so what we try to do is pose the problem as solving some optimization. So in the grocery store, it might be optimizing the number of items somebody's going to buy, right? Or optimizing the smallest amount of walking that you have to do to get to achieve collecting, say, finite set of 10 things you have to get. How little do I have to walk, right? So how do I put these things in such a way that the people will generally walk the smallest amount? Right? So that's the optimization problem. Where Amazon should put their warehouses so that they can reduce the cost of the trucks going up in and out. Right? That's again an optimization problem. And in fact, most of bioinformatics problems actually are stated as an optimization problem.
I think with respect to the supermarket, I think some survey was done, and the item that is purchased more often than not is orange juice. And so they put things near orange juice that are big sellers, like milk and eggs.
They're trying to optimize the amount of money that people